Emmet once again climbed out of the hide raft. He liked using hide rafts, especially with hide oars. They didn't make as much noise as he cut through the water, so he was able to come back close to Catfish Grove. He knew the layout. He'd been here once before. It was familiar. And although he was new to this bayou and new to this whole hunting exploit, he needed as much familiarity as he could get. At least he knew somewhat of the lay of the land. After his first hunt, it was certainly more... There's certainly more to it than he had initially thought. Emmet, he could sense its presence throughout the region as the creature twists and grows into its grotesque form. The creature leaves a bit of its essence behind, and that's what Emmet is looking for. Something about the pieces seek the whole. So Emmet approached the small cottage. Well, it was Catfish Grove. It reminded him of a smaller town that he'd drifted through. If he remembered right, it was a community that harvested lumber. They did rather well for themselves for where they were. And he wasn't there to rob them. He wasn't there to hurt anybody. He was just there because, well, no one there seemed to know who he was. And once you get to a certain notoriety, that becomes harder and harder to find a place where you can rest your hat and enjoy the finer things of life. Fortunately for Emmet, he was many things, but he was certainly a man who couldn't quite hold his liquor. One night of gambling and boozing and whoring, well, Emmet's calm and quiet demeanor got away from him, and for once his mouth ran faster than his feet. And Emmet, he started letting each and every person around him know exactly what he thought of them. Or more to the point, the way he thought they looked. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, it went over about as well as you'd suspect. Fists were thrown, and bottles were thrown, and it wasn't long before knives were thrown, and after knives, it wasn't long before bullets, and, well, once bullets started getting thrown, men started dying, and yet again, Emmet found another sleepy town that he was no longer welcome at. So he had to move along his way. Emmet calmed down. He felt that he was being hunted. In fact, Emmet knew he was being hunted. See, that sleepy little town, he had let his drink get the better of him. Well, people died. There are going to be some people that take offense to that, and when you kill a man's brother, and then kill a man's father, well, they take exception to that. One such man was one by the name of Richard Baker. Now, the whole fight had started while they were around a poker table. And Emmet became acutely aware that the man across the table losing so much money to him, well, his name was Richard Baker. And Emmet found that quite entertaining, that across the table, face to face, was a man by the name of Dick Baker. Well, as much fun as Richard was having at Dick's expense, well, Richard's brother didn't find it very funny. And although Dick was angry, he felt that he was going to get a turn of the card and get his money back, and then he could run it all up in Emmet's face. And, well, Richard's brother was a hothead and started something his fists and gun couldn't back up, and, well, Emmet could. And he didn't blame Emmet's father for stepping in, and in reality, he didn't really know who fired the first shot, but he knew who fired the last. So he didn't blame Richard for hunting him, for tracking him down. In fact, there was part of him that believed that Richard had every right. But so long as he had strength, and so long as he had a will to live, and so long as Richard was going to put Emmet in a position of he had to choose between Richard living or Emmet living, well, Emmet likes Emmet more than Emmet likes Richard. Emmet knew that Richard was after him. He'd heard stories, he'd heard rumors. He'd heard that Richard was going around saying that Emmet had shot his brother and his father in the back. Emmet wasn't having his name being slandered. Emmet knew that he was an outlaw. Emmet was very aware of his sins and his crimes, and he owned up to those. He never tried to hide who he was. Emmet knew who he was. He knew what he was to society. He may be a lot of things, but a liar Emmet was not. Definitely, Emmet was no coward. So he couldn't abide by these slanderous words. But at the same time, he didn't think much of Richard, so he didn't think to really do anything about it. If the man was going to slander him, the man was going to slander him. But if he saw that man, well, to Emmet, it sounded like Richard just missed his father and his brother. So if he really wanted to meet them so much, well, Emmet would oblige. Although one of the more concerning things that Emmet had heard about was, well, Richard had acquired a very peculiar weapon. Much like Emmet. Emmet had acquired that chain pistol, he supposed that inventor had called it. But sounded like Richard had acquired something much more nefarious. His rifle was based off of a very popular Russian repeating rifle. Only this rifle didn't have a bolt. It ran on rollers, and as soon as it would fire a shell, it would pop it out and eject it and load another shell right away. And, well, this rifle was semi-automatic. And that semi-automatic rifle, well, it could fire 10 shots in succession, 10 very large shots in succession. And that sounded like something he'd much rather avoid. So when it came time to shooting hunters, If he saw himself a man carrying one of those rifles, he'd perhaps have to put that man down, assuming that it was Richard. Emmet was all right with that. But while he was up here, he saw a lantern burning, which was odd. The dead had no need for a lantern, a light. It looked like someone had been here, not only sleeping, but eating as well. And next to that food and drink was a diary, journal, if you will. And in that journal, Emmet found that it was none other than Richard Baker's. And as he turned the pages, and believe you me, this journal was no page-turner. Richard was not an eloquent man, and he was certainly not a well-read or even a good writer. But he was definitely a tortured soul. His father and his brother were... Richard Baker was certainly a tortured soul, and rightfully so. Not only his brother, but his father were killed by the same man, and, well, I'm pretty sure that even Richard knew that he couldn't take Emmet in a fair fight. Yet again, Emmet was all right with that. But the journal had some peculiar things written across it. It seemed that Richard was a little more of a tortured soul than Emmet had really considered. I suppose losing his brother and his father at the same time would do that to a man, and it seemed that Richard had abandoned his own name, perhaps knowing that it was his name that caused his brother and his father to go to his defense at the beginning, and that's what led to their demise. So it appears that Richard had taken up his father's name of Kelly Baker. And that rifle that he had altered, well, it was none other than Kelly Baker's war rifle. Emmet wasn't sure how he felt about it. Certainly had men come after him on a vendetta before. It certainly wasn't a first. But it did seem that Richard was taking a particular fancy at making it his life's mission to seek revenge. This episode was almost completely done by improv. The viewer suggested it, and I rolled with it. I hope you get as engrossed in the story of Emmet as those who were part of its development. I'll hunt with you again soon.